My husband assaulted me in front of his entire family, and no one stood up to him, but my daughter did something that made him turn pale. It was Thanksgiving at his parents' house, and I should have known better than to show up with store-bought dinner rolls. For 8 years of marriage to Derek, I had learned that everything had to be perfect in front of his family, or there would be consequences later. But I had been pulling 12-hour shifts at the hospital all week and barely had time to shower, let alone bake homemade bread. His mother, Patricia, made the first comment as I set the plastic container on her perfectly set dining table. She lifted one roll with her manicured fingers like it might contaminate her entire meal. "Well," she said loud enough for the entire room to hear, "I suppose not everyone has time for family traditions anymore." 22 family members were crammed into that dining room. His parents, both brothers with their wives, 6 kids ranging from toddlers to teenagers, and various aunts and uncles who had driven in from neighboring towns. All of them turned to stare at me like I had committed some unforgivable sin. I forced a smile and explained that I had been working overtime at the hospital. 3 nurses had called in sick with the flu and someone had to cover the emergency department. I thought they would understand. His father was a retired police officer. His brothers worked construction. They knew about demanding jobs. But Derek's face was already turning that familiar shade of red that meant trouble was coming. His jaw clenched the way it always did when he thought I had embarrassed him. The vein in his temple started throbbing. "You always have an excuse," he said loudly enough to cut through every conversation in the room. The football game on TV suddenly seemed too loud. Someone's fork clinked against their plate. One of the toddlers asked for more juice, but nobody moved to help him. All eyes were on us now. "I'm not making excuses," I said as calmly as I could manage. "I'm explaining why I didn't have time to bake this week." That's when he hit me. The slap echoed through the dining room like a gunshot. My cheek exploded in pain and I could taste blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my lip. The force of it knocked me sideways and I had to grab the back of a chair to keep from falling. Complete silence fell over the room. Not one person moved. Not one person spoke. His father stared at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. His mother suddenly developed an intense interest in folding and refolding her napkin. His brothers exchanged a quick glance but immediately looked away. Even the children had gone completely quiet. "Don't you ever embarrass me like that again?" Derek hissed through clenched teeth. That's when my 16-year-old daughter Chloe stood up from the kids' table in the corner. She had been living with us for 2 years since her father died in a motorcycle accident. Derek had never liked her, always complained that she was too mouthy, too independent, too much like me for his taste. She walked over slowly, deliberately, pulling her phone out of her back pocket as she moved. When she reached where Derek was standing, she held it up and aimed it directly at his face. "Smile," she said with the sweetest voice imaginable. "You're about to become very famous." Derek's angry red face drained to white so fast I thought he might pass out. His hands, which had been clenched into fists, started shaking. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded. "I've been recording everything for the last hour," Chloe announced to the entire room. "Every nasty comment, every threat, every single slap. And guess what, Uncle Derek? It's already uploaded to 3 different cloud servers." She turned to face his entire family, who were now staring at her like she had grown a second head. "Did you all know that in this state, witnessing domestic violence and failing to report it when children are present can make you legal accessories to the crime?" Derek lunged forward to grab her phone, but Chloe stepped back smoothly, like she had been expecting exactly that reaction. "Too late," she said calmly. "It's already been automatically sent to 3 different people with instructions to release everything if something happens to me or Mom." His mother, Patricia, finally found her voice, though it came out as more of a squeak. "Now just wait 1 minute here. This is getting completely out of hand." "No," Chloe said firmly, cutting her off before she could continue. "You wait. All of you just wait. You all sat there like statues and watched this man hit my mother. You're all complicit in what just happened here." She held up her phone so everyone could see the screen clearly. The video was still recording, the red dot pulsing steadily in the corner. "See this little red light? I've been live streaming everything to my best friend's private YouTube channel for the past hour. Every word Derek said to my mother, every nasty comment from the peanut gallery, and most importantly, that beautiful right hook he just threw. It's all there, recorded in high definition, and it's already got viewers." Derek's face somehow managed to get even whiter. His job at First National Bank had strict conduct policies. One whiff of scandal and he would be out on the street. His reputation in this small town was everything to him. "You're lying," he said, but his voice cracked on the words. "Am I?" Chloe asked innocently. She turned the phone screen toward him so he could see exactly what she was seeing. 247 viewers and counting. The comment section is getting very interesting. Want me to read some of them out loud? Derek stared at the screen in horror. I could see his career flashing before his eyes. The bank president was a deacon at our church. Half the loan committee members were sitting in this very room. "Delete it," he demanded. "Delete it right now." "I can't," Chloe said with exaggerated sympathy. "It's live streaming. And my friend is recording everything on her end too. Insurance policy, you know? In case something mysteriously happens to my phone." She looked around the room at all the shocked faces staring back at her. But here's the really interesting part. I didn't just start recording today. I've been documenting everything for 2 years now. Every time Derek screamed at my mother, every bruise she tried to hide with makeup, every time she had to lie to the doctors about how she got injured. Derek's youngest brother, Trevor, finally found his voice. "Derek, maybe we should just calm down and talk about this like adults." "Shut your mouth," Derek snapped at him. "This little brat thinks she can threaten me in front of my entire family." "That little brat just saved your wife from another beating," Chloe replied coolly. "But since you brought up threats, let me tell you exactly what's going to happen here." She pulled up something else on her phone screen, swiping through several apps with practiced efficiency. "You have exactly 10 minutes to agree to my terms, or I make some very interesting phone calls. First call goes to the police to report domestic violence with video evidence. Second call goes to your boss at the bank. Third call goes to Channel 7 News. They love stories about prominent local businessmen who beat their wives. The room had gone completely silent again. Even the football game seemed to have gotten quieter, as if the TV itself was holding its breath. Derek's hands were shaking with rage, but I could see the defeat creeping into his eyes. He was trapped, and he knew it. "What do you want?" he finally whispered. "I want you to pack your things and get out of our house tonight," Chloe said matter-of-factly. "I want you to sign divorce papers without contesting anything. No alimony demands, no fighting over assets, no claiming half of Mom's retirement fund. She keeps the house, the car, her savings, everything." Derek let out a bitter laugh. "You can't be serious. You're just a kid." "I'm old enough to testify in court," Chloe replied. "I'm old enough to understand legal procedures, and I'm definitely old enough to operate social media. So here's what happens if you don't agree to my very reasonable terms." She held up her phone again, scrolling through what looked like multiple screens of evidence. "This video gets sent to your boss, all your coworkers, every member of the church board, and every single social media platform I can find. Your face becomes the poster child for domestic violence awareness in this county. And trust me, it will go viral faster than you can say unemployment line." She looked around the room at his family members, who were all staring at her with mixtures of shock and horror. "And all of you get to be internet famous too. The family who watched a man beat his wife and did absolutely nothing to stop it. I'm sure that will go over really well at Sunday service." His mother Patricia gasped dramatically and clutched her chest like she was having a heart attack. "You wouldn't dare do such a thing to this family." "Try me," Chloe said without hesitation. "I've watched this man hurt my mother for 2 years. I've documented every single incident, every bruise, every threat, every time she had to lie about falling downstairs or walking into doors." She swiped to another screen on her phone, showing what looked like a detailed spreadsheet. Police reports from neighbors who called about the shouting matches. Hospital records from when Mom's wrist was mysteriously broken last spring. Photos of bruises taken with timestamps. Voice recordings of Derek threatening to kill her if she ever tried to leave him. Derek stared at her in complete disbelief. "How did you get access to all of that?" "I'm 16, not brain dead," Chloe said. "I've been systematically building a legal case for months. Hidden cameras in the house that you never knew about. Audio recording devices in my backpack. I even have the receipt from when you made Mom pay for her own emergency room visit because you claimed she was being dramatic about her injuries." The room felt like it was shrinking around us. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the children seemed to sense that something monumental was happening. "So here's how this works," Chloe continued in the same calm, reasonable tone. "You have exactly 8 minutes left to agree to my terms, or I start making those phone calls. First to Detective Morrison at the police station, then to Mr. Henderson at the bank, then to every news outlet within a 50-mile radius." She glanced at her phone screen again. "And the viewer count is up to 438 now. Word spreads fast in small towns, especially when it involves prominent families making complete fools of themselves on live video." Derek's hands had moved beyond shaking now. His whole body was trembling with a combination of rage and terror. He knew she had him completely cornered. There was no way out that didn't involve total humiliation. "Fine," he whispered so quietly I almost didn't hear him. "I can't hear you," Chloe said loudly. "And neither can the 438 people currently watching this train wreck. Speak up so everyone can hear you clearly." "Fine," Derek said louder, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'll leave. I'll sign whatever papers you want me to sign." "And," Chloe prompted, raising her eyebrows expectantly. Derek looked confused and frustrated. "And what?" "The apology," she said patiently. "To my mother. For 8 years of systematic abuse. On camera. For all these witnesses and all those viewers to hear." Derek's jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. "I'm not going to—" 512 viewers now," Chloe interrupted, glancing at her phone. "Your choice. Apologize now or explain to your boss on Monday morning why you're trending on Twitter for all the wrong reasons." The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking away the seconds. Someone's stomach growled. A child coughed somewhere in the back of the room. Finally, Derek turned to face me. His face was red with humiliation, and his voice sounded like he was being strangled. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, barely audible. "Louder," Chloe said firmly, "and be specific about what you're sorry for. These people deserve to know exactly what kind of man they've been enabling." Derek's face went through several different shades of red before he finally spoke again. "I'm sorry for hitting you," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "For hurting you. For 8 years of systematic physical and emotional abuse," Chloe corrected. "Say the whole thing. For 8 years of abuse," Derek repeated through gritted teeth, the words seeming to physically pain him as they came out. Chloe nodded once and then did something with her phone that made the screen change. "There," she said with satisfaction. "Now you have exactly 30 minutes to pack your things and get out of our house. Mom and I will be staying at a hotel tonight, but when we come back tomorrow morning, I don't want to see a single trace of your existence in that house." Derek stormed out of the dining room without another word. We could hear him upstairs, slamming drawers and throwing things around his bedroom. Something glass shattered against a wall. His family remained frozen in their seats, staring at Chloe like she was some kind of alien creature they had never encountered before. Finally, his father cleared his throat nervously. "Maybe we should have said something when—" "Should have what?" I asked, finding my voice for the first time since this whole nightmare had started. Should have stopped your son from hitting his wife? Should have called the police? Should have done literally anything other than sit there and watch like it was dinner theater. His mother started crying then, big dramatic tears that smeared her carefully applied makeup. We didn't know it was so bad, she sobbed. We thought maybe you two just argued sometimes like all couples do. You didn't want to know, Chloe said bluntly. There's a big difference between not knowing and not wanting to know. You all chose to look the other way because it was easier than dealing with the truth. She looked around the room at all of Derek's relatives, making eye contact with each person individually. How many times has mom shown up to family gatherings with bruises? How many times has she made excuses for injuries that didn't make sense? How many times have you heard Derek screaming at her and just turned up the TV volume? The silence that followed was deafening. Nobody could meet her eyes. Nobody had an answer that wouldn't make them look complicit. His Aunt Rebecca, who had been sitting quietly in the corner throughout the entire confrontation, suddenly spoke up. There was that Christmas 3 years ago, she said quietly, when you came in wearing that heavy sweater in the middle of summer and said you were cold from being sick. His Uncle Donald nodded slowly. And the 4th of July when you couldn't lift your left arm properly. Said you'd pulled a muscle gardening. More family members started speaking up, their voices getting stronger as they remembered incident after incident they had chosen to ignore. The Easter, when you had that black eye and said you'd walked into a door in the dark. The birthday party where you winced every time someone hugged you. Last Christmas when you couldn't sit down properly and kept making excuses about back pain. All those times Derek would snap at you in public and we'd all pretend we didn't notice. The way he'd grab your arm too tightly when he thought nobody was looking. How he'd humiliate you at family gatherings and we'd all just sit there uncomfortably. As each family member added their own memory to the growing list, Derek's mother, Patricia, began crying harder. The weight of their collective willful ignorance was finally hitting home. We all knew, she whispered through her tears. God help us. We all knew, and we did nothing. 28 minutes later, Derek came back downstairs carrying 2 large suitcases and a duffel bag. His hair was disheveled and there was a wild look in his eyes that scared me more than his anger had. I'll be staying at my brother's place, he announced to no one in particular. No, you won't, his brother Trevor replied quietly. My wife doesn't want you around our children after what we just witnessed here. Derek stared at him in shock and disbelief. What did you just say to me? I said find somewhere else to stay, Trevor repeated, his voice getting stronger. Lisa doesn't want someone who beats women living in the same house as our kids. She doesn't want our children thinking that kind of behavior is normal or acceptable. Derek looked around the room desperately, searching for support from someone, anyone in his family. Mom? He asked plaintively. His mother couldn't even look at him. I think you should just go, Derek. Dad? His father was suddenly very interested in the pattern on his dinner plate. Your mother's right. Maybe some time apart would be good for everyone involved. Uncle Donald? Aunt Rebecca? They both shook their heads. I don't think that's a good idea, his uncle said firmly. My grandchildren visit our house. I won't have them around someone who thinks violence is acceptable. As Derek walked toward the front door, dragging his suitcases behind him, Chloe called out one final warning. Remember what I told you about all that evidence, she said calmly. If you ever come near my mother again, if you try to cause problems with the divorce proceedings, if you even think about retaliating against either of us in any way, everything goes public immediately. And next time, I won't give you the option of apologizing your way out of it. The front door slammed so hard it rattled the windows throughout the house. The room remained completely silent for several long minutes. Finally, I stood up on shaking legs and took Chloe's hand. We should go now, I said quietly. As we gathered our coats and purses, Derek's youngest nephew, maybe 7 or 8 years old, tugged on the hem of my shirt. Are you going to be okay now? He asked with a kind of innocent concern that only children can manage. I knelt down to his eye level, fighting back tears. Yes, sweetie, I said softly. I'm going to be okay now. His mother, Derek's sister-in-law, came over and put her hand on my shoulder. I'm so sorry we didn't speak up, she said. I'm ashamed that it took a child to show us what we should have done years ago. In the car, Chloe and I drove in complete silence for the first 10 miles. My hands were shaking too badly to hold the steering wheel steady. My face still throbbed where Derek had hit me. The metallic taste of blood lingered in my mouth. Finally, I found the courage to ask the question that had been burning in my mind. How long have you been planning all of this? Since the first night I heard him hit you, Chloe said simply. I knew nobody else was going to protect you, so I had to figure out how to do it myself. Tears started flowing down my cheeks uncontrollably. You shouldn't have had to do any of that. You're just a child. This should have been handled by adults. I stopped being just a child the night my dad died, Chloe said matter-of-factly. I definitely stopped being just a child when I moved into a house where I had to worry about my mother's safety every single day. She stared out the passenger window at the darkening sky. Someone had to be the adult in that situation, and it obviously wasn't going to be any of them. They all knew what was happening and they all chose to pretend it wasn't their problem. She was absolutely right. A 16-year-old girl had shown more courage and moral clarity than a room full of grown adults. We spent that night in a cheap motel on the other side of town. The clerk behind the desk looked at us with concern when he saw my swollen face and Chloe's protective stance beside me. I assured him we were fine, that we just needed a quiet place to stay for one night. I called in sick to work the next morning, something I had never done unless I was actually hospitalized. Chloe skipped school for the first time in her life. We went shopping for new locks for all the doors and windows of our house. We bought security cameras to install around the property. We opened a new bank account that Derek had no access to. When we finally returned home the following afternoon, Derek was completely gone. Not just his clothes and personal items, but every trace of his existence in our house. His favorite recliner was missing from the living room. The golf clubs he kept in the garage were gone. Even his collection of beer mugs had vanished from the kitchen cabinet. but he had also taken things that weren't legally his to take. My grandmother's antique jewelry box was missing from our bedroom dresser. The emergency cash I kept hidden in a coffee can in the kitchen was gone. Several valuable items from my hope chest had disappeared, including a pearl necklace that had belonged to my great-grandmother. I started to get angry about the theft, ready to call the police and report it, but Chloe put her hand on my shoulder and stopped me. "Let him have it all," she said calmly. "Consider it a very small price to pay for your freedom and safety." She was right, as usual. A few pieces of jewelry and some cash were nothing compared to being free from 8 years of abuse and terror. Over the next few weeks, Derek made several attempts to contact me. He left voicemails apologizing and begging me to take him back. He sent flowers to my workplace with cards saying he had changed and would never hurt me again. He showed up at the grocery store one evening, cornering me in the cereal aisle to plead his case. Each time I reminded him about Chloe's evidence and her threat to make everything public. Each time he backed down and disappeared again. 6 months later, Derek signed the divorce papers without contesting a single detail. His lawyer had apparently advised him that fighting the divorce would only result in more public exposure of the evidence Chloe had collected. The entire process was completed within 8 months, faster than anyone had thought possible given Derek's controlling nature. Derek's job at the bank had mysteriously evaporated within 2 weeks of that Thanksgiving confrontation. The official story was budget cuts and departmental restructuring, but everyone in our small town knew the real reason. Word had spread through the community like wildfire, even though Chloe had never actually released the video publicly. Small towns don't keep secrets very well, especially secrets involving prominent local families. His fall from grace was swift and brutal. Within 6 months, Derek had gone from being a respected bank loan officer with a nice house and expensive car to working at an auto parts store in the next town over. He rented a small apartment above a pizza shop and drove a 15-year-old pickup truck with rust spots and a broken muffler. The last I heard about Derek was from his former coworker at the bank, who told me he had moved 4 towns away and was working night shifts at a warehouse. His reputation had been so thoroughly destroyed in our community that he couldn't find decent work anywhere within a 50-mile radius. Chloe never did release the full footage publicly, but she kept her promise about maintaining multiple backup copies of everything. Derek's family members had slowly started reaching out over the months with awkward phone calls and uncomfortable encounters at the grocery store. They sent birthday cards and holiday invitations, trying to rebuild relationships they had helped destroy through years of willful ignorance. But we weren't interested in pretending everything was fine now. Some bridges, once burned by cowardice and complicity, are better left as ashes. Some relationships can't be repaired with apologies and awkward small talk. The night everything happened, as we sat in that dingy motel room sharing a pizza and watching terrible late-night television, Chloe had looked up from her homework with the most serious expression I had ever seen on her young face. "Mom, I need you to promise me something really important." "Anything," I had said without hesitation. "Promise me you'll never let anyone treat you like that again. Promise me you won't go back to him if he shows up crying and apologizing and swearing he's changed forever this time." "I promise," I had said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "And if you ever even think about taking him back or letting some other man treat you badly, remember that over 400 people watched him hit you tonight, and not one single member of his family was surprised by what they saw." She was absolutely right about that. Looking back with clear eyes and a healthy perspective, I realized that Derek's family's reaction that night hadn't been shock or surprise at his violence. It had been embarrassment at being caught enabling and ignoring his behavior for years. They had all known exactly what kind of man he was, and they had all chosen to look the other way, because confronting him would have been difficult and uncomfortable. Chloe is 18 now, preparing to leave for college in the fall on a full academic scholarship to study pre-law. She wants to specialize in domestic violence advocacy and family law. She's already been accepted to volunteer at the local women's shelter, and she's started a support group for teenagers who live in homes where domestic violence occurs. She's also been invited to speak at several high schools about recognizing the signs of abuse and knowing when to seek help. Her story has become something of a local legend, though she always insists on keeping the focus on helping other victims rather than celebrating what she did that day. When people ask me how I managed to raise such a strong, courageous daughter, I always tell them the complete truth. I didn't raise her to be that way through any special parenting technique or philosophy. Life circumstances and tragic events forced her to become strong out of pure necessity. Sometimes the most terrible situations create the most remarkable people, and sometimes it takes a child to show a room full of adults what real courage and moral clarity actually look like. The scar on my lip from where Derek hit me that Thanksgiving has mostly faded now, but I can still feel the slight ridge if I run my tongue across it. I've decided to keep it as a permanent reminder of how low I had allowed my life to sink, and how much I owe my daughter for having the strength and intelligence to fight back when I couldn't find the strength to fight for myself. The healing process hasn't been quick or easy. I spent months in therapy, working through 8 years of psychological abuse and manipulation. I had to relearn how to make decisions without fear, how to speak up for myself, how to recognize that I deserve to be treated with basic human respect. Chloe went through her own counseling process, dealing with the trauma of watching her mother being abused and feeling responsible for protecting me. We learned together how families are supposed to function, how healthy relationships work, what normal conflict resolution looks like. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Derek's brother Trevor at the hardware store. He looked mortified when he saw me coming down the aisle, clearly wanting to disappear into the floor rather than have an awkward conversation. But I walked right up to him with confidence I had never possessed during my marriage. "How are your children doing?" I asked pleasantly, genuinely interested in their well-being. "They're doing well," he mumbled, obviously uncomfortable with the interaction. "I'm glad to hear that," I said sincerely. "I hope they never have to go through what Chloe experienced that day." I hope they never have to be the adult in a room full of adults who forgot how to do the right thing. He nodded quickly and hurried away without saying another word, but I could see in his eyes that my words had hit their target. That night, I told Chloe about the encounter over dinner. She just smiled and shook her head with wisdom far beyond her 18 years. Some people learn from their mistakes and become better human beings, she said thoughtfully. Others just get better at avoiding eye contact with the evidence of their mistakes. I guess we know which category Uncle Trevor falls into. My daughter is wise beyond her years, forged in fires that no child should ever have to experience. But she emerged from those flames stronger, more determined, and more morally courageous than most adults ever managed to become in their entire lives. She saved both of our lives that day, and she did it with nothing but preparation, courage, technology, and the absolute refusal to accept that things had to stay the way they were. Sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night in my safe house with new locks and security cameras, I wonder what would have happened if Chloe hadn't been there that Thanksgiving day. Would I have gone home with Derek and endured another brutal beating in private? Would I have continued making excuses and covering bruises and lying to doctors for another 8 years? Would I have eventually ended up in the hospital with life-threatening injuries or worse? I try not to dwell on those dark possibilities too much. Instead, I focus on the bright future we're building together. A future where we don't have to walk on eggshells or hide injuries or lie to medical professionals about how accidents happened. A future where we can both be strong and independent and completely free from fear. Last week, I was promoted to charge nurse in the emergency department where I work. My supervisor said my experience with trauma and crisis situations made me uniquely qualified to help other victims who come through our doors. I've started volunteering with a local domestic violence organization, sharing my story with other women who are trapped in abusive relationships. Chloe has been accepted to 3 different law schools, all offering substantial scholarships. She's planning to specialize in family law and domestic violence advocacy, with the goal of eventually starting her own practice focused on helping abuse victims navigate the legal system. Just last month, she received an award from the State Attorney General's office for her volunteer work with teenage victims of domestic violence. During her acceptance speech, she said something that brought tears to my eyes. The adults in my life taught me that sometimes you have to save yourself because nobody else will do it for you. But I learned that once you save yourself, you have a responsibility to help save others who are still trapped. If anyone ever asks me what real love looks like, I tell them it looks like a 16-year-old girl standing up to a room full of adults and refusing to let her mother be hurt anymore. It looks like courage in the face of overwhelming odds and impossible circumstances. It looks like justice served by someone too young to vote, but old enough to understand the difference between right and wrong. It looks like my daughter, and I couldn't be more proud of the incredible woman she has become and continues to become every single day. The other day, we were cleaning out some old boxes in the garage when we came across a photo album from Derek's family gatherings over the years. As we flipped through the pages, we could see the progression of my isolation and fear in picture after picture. Christmas photos where I'm standing slightly apart from everyone else, my smile forced and my eyes sad. Birthday parties where Derek has his hand on my shoulder, but his grip looks possessive rather than affectionate. Family vacations where I'm wearing long sleeves in summer heat to cover bruises. But the last photo in the album was different. It was taken at Chloe's high school graduation just 6 months after that terrible Thanksgiving. In this picture, I'm standing tall and confident, my arm around my daughter, both of us smiling with genuine joy and hope for the future. That's the photo we framed and put on our mantle. Not as a reminder of where we came from, but as a celebration of where we're going. Derek tried to contact us one more time about a year after the divorce was final. He showed up at Chloe's graduation ceremony, standing in the back of the auditorium, like he had some right to be there. When Chloe walked across the stage to receive her diploma, I saw him start to move forward, probably planning to approach us afterward. But Chloe had seen him too. As soon as the ceremony ended, she walked straight over to where he was standing. I followed, my heart pounding, worried about what might happen. Chloe looked him up and down, taking in his wrinkled clothes and defeated posture. He had aged 10 years in the 18 months since we'd seen him last. His hair was graying, his face was drawn, and he looked like he hadn't been sleeping well. "Congratulations," he said quietly. "I'm proud of you." "No, you're not," Chloe replied calmly. "You're here because you want something. What is it?" Derek glanced at me, then back at her. "I just wanted to see you graduate. I helped raise you for 2 years. "You didn't raise me," Chloe said firmly. "You tolerated my presence in your house while you abused my mother. There's a difference." "I've changed," Derek said desperately. "I've been going to therapy. I've been working on myself." "Good for you," Chloe said without emotion. "That doesn't change what you did to us. That doesn't erase the damage you caused." She pulled out her phone, and Derek immediately took a step back. "Don't worry," she said. "I'm not recording you. I'm just checking the time. You have exactly 30 seconds to say whatever you came here to say, and then you need to leave and never contact us again." Derek looked at me with tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry for everything I did to you. I know I can't take it back, but I want you to know that I regret every moment of it." I looked at him for a long moment, this man who had terrorized me for 8 years, who had made me afraid in my own home, who had stolen my confidence and self-worth. "I know you're sorry," I said finally, "but sorry doesn't heal broken bones. Sorry doesn't erase nightmares. Sorry doesn't give me back the years I spent walking on eggshells." Derek nodded miserably. "I know. I just wanted you to know. Now you've told us," Chloe said, looking at her phone. "Time's up. Please leave." Derek looked like he wanted to say more, but something in Chloe's expression stopped him. He turned and walked away without another word. We never saw him again. 2 years later, we heard through mutual acquaintances that Derek had moved to another state entirely. He was working as a night janitor at an office building and living in a studio apartment. He had never remarried, never had children of his own, never rebuilt the life he had destroyed through his own actions. I felt sorry for him, in a distant way. not sorry enough to forgive him or welcome him back into our lives, but sorry that he had chosen a path that led to such isolation and regret. His story became a cautionary tale that I sometimes shared with other abuse victims. Not everyone who hurts you will find redemption, and you don't owe them the chance to try. Chloe graduated from law school last spring, finishing in the top 5% of her class. During her graduation speech as class president, she talked about the responsibility that comes with legal knowledge and the importance of standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. After the ceremony, as we were taking photos with her diploma, a reporter from the local newspaper approached us. She had heard about Chloe's work with domestic violence victims and wanted to do a feature story about her advocacy efforts. During the interview, the reporter asked Chloe what advice she would give to other young people who witness abuse in their homes. Document everything, Chloe said without hesitation. Take photos, make recordings, keep detailed notes. But most importantly, remember that it's not your fault and it's not your responsibility to fix the adults in your life. Your only job is to stay safe and get help when you can. The reporter turned to me. What would you tell other women who are trapped in abusive relationships? I thought carefully before answering. Your children are watching, I said. They're learning what normal relationships look like by watching you. They're learning whether they deserve to be treated with respect by watching how you allow yourself to be treated. That doesn't mean the abuse is your fault. It never is. But if you can't find the strength to leave for yourself, maybe you can find it for them. The article ran on the front page of the Sunday edition, with a large photo of Chloe in her cap and gown. Within a week, 3 different women had contacted the domestic violence shelter asking for help, citing the article as their inspiration to leave abusive relationships. One of those women brought her teenage son with her to the shelter. When I met them during one of my volunteer shifts, the boy reminded me so much of Chloe at that age, scared but determined, protective of his mother but angry at the situation they were in. I spent an afternoon talking with him about what he had witnessed, helping him understand that none of it was his fault. I gave him my phone number and told him he could call me anytime if he needed to talk to someone who understood what he was going through. 6 months later, he called to tell me his mother had gotten a job and they had moved into their own apartment. He was doing well in school and had joined the debate team. His mother was taking college classes at night, working toward a degree in social work. These are the victories that matter now. Not the dramatic confrontation that ended my marriage, but the quiet moments of healing and growth that followed. The slow process of rebuilding our lives. The gradual return of confidence and joy. The discovery that we were stronger than we had ever imagined. Chloe now works for a legal aid organization representing low-income women in divorce and custody cases. She's argued before the state Supreme Court twice, winning both cases. She's been featured in legal journals for her innovative approaches to protecting abuse victims during custody proceedings. But what I'm most proud of is not her professional success, but the person she has become. She's compassionate without being naive, strong without being hard, confident without being arrogant. She understands justice not as revenge, but as accountability and protection for the vulnerable. Last month, on the anniversary of that terrible Thanksgiving, we started a new tradition. Instead of dwelling on the worst day of our lives, we celebrate it as our Independence Day. We make dinner together, homemade rolls included, and we talk about our gratitude for the courage that freed us and the opportunities that followed. This year, Chloe brought her boyfriend to join us. He's a fellow lawyer, someone who shares her passion for justice and her commitment to helping others. When she told him our story, his first response was to ask what he could do to support domestic violence organizations in our community. As I watched them working together in the kitchen, laughing and planning their future, I realized something profound. The cycle of dysfunction and abuse that had defined my marriage was truly broken. Chloe had learned what healthy relationships look like by watching us rebuild our lives with respect and support for each other. She had learned that love doesn't involve fear, that disagreements don't require violence, that partners should lift each other up rather than tear each other down. She had learned these lessons not through lectures or books, but by living them with me as we created a new life together. The 16-year-old girl who stood up to a room full of adults that Thanksgiving had grown into a woman who stands up for justice in courtrooms across the state. She had transformed her trauma into purpose, her pain into power, her fear into fearlessness. And every time someone asks me how I raised such an extraordinary daughter, I give them the same answer. I didn't raise her to be extraordinary. Extraordinary circumstances raised her to be the person she needed to become. My job was simply to survive long enough for her to save us both. But perhaps that's what real love looks like in the end. Not grand gestures or perfect moments, but the daily choice to show up for each other, to protect each other, to believe in each other's strength even when that strength is hidden beneath layers of fear and doubt. It looks like a 16-year-old girl refusing to let her mother be hurt anymore. It looks like 2 women building a new life from the ashes of an old one. It looks like the courage to break cycles, to demand better, to believe that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. It looks like freedom, hard-won and deeply treasured. And it looks like the future we continue to build together, one brave choice at a time.